On today's show, the Padres make new additions to their coaching staff with a former new bench coach and hitting coach. Do these wonderful individuals have what it takes to help Craig Stammen and also help some of these Padres stars that have been underperforming for the past few years?
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the number one sports podcast network in the business for Friday, November 28th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering this team for 6 years now, not just for this podcast, but various other outlets, including justbaseball.com, chief among them. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Be sure to go check that out, guys. On today's episode, we are reacting to the Padres hiring Randy Knorr and veteran hitter and former major leaguer Steven Souza Jr. to be their bench coach and hitting coach, respectively, right? Or at least I should say one of the bench coaches, right? But really exciting news, and we're going to get into some of your mailbag questions, to which I will actually be apologizing to Dodgers fans. Just a teensy bit, because it's something that I genuinely got wrong and I didn't even think about. But first, let's talk about the news. Reading now from The Athletic, as I always like to do, Steven Souza Jr. and Randy Knorr. The Padres are hiring a pair of instructors familiar with Craig Stammen to fill key openings on the rookie manager's coaching staff. Former Washington Nationals bench coach Randy Knorr and Steven Souza Jr., an ex-outfielder and Nationals teammate of Stammen's, have agreed to become the Padres' bench coach and hitting coach, respectively, league sources told The Athletic. Knorr, 57, was Washington's bullpen coach when Stammen, a former pitcher, made his big league debut with the Nationals, actually. And there's other things in this article. I don't want to just recite the entire article. You guys can go check it out. I actually thought that it was really interesting that they mentioned that Steven Souza Jr. was part of the 3-team trade in December 2014 that sent him to the Rays, shortstop Trey Turner, unfortunately, to the Nationals, and outfielder Bogaerts to the Padres. I actually remember when that trade went down because I had, believe it or not, I believe, Will Myers and Steven Souza Jr. in fantasy. Pretty funny that one year. But overall, my first reactions to this are that fans are immediately going to see, okay, classic. We're just bringing in people that Stammen knows, right? And I frankly don't have too much to say about Randy Knorr in particular, right? He's a veteran coach, and I assume that having him on the bench, this is what we thought was going to happen. They were going to bring in some people to help alongside with Craig Stammen, given his lack of experience, right? They were going to have some people in there that are some bigger veterans, right? I imagine that there may be another hiring as well at some point through the offseason, unless everything else is full and I just haven't been paying attention. So we'll have to see how that goes down and whatnot. But cool, right? That's totally fine. Want to have some veteran in there that could help out Stammen because it is going to be a season that probably features some learning curves and whatnot, right? He spent 4 seasons as the Nationals' bench coach, served as their first base coach in 2021, and was recently reassigned from Washington from minor league catching coordinator to a senior assistant to new president of baseball operations, Paul Tabani. Very cool. He replaces Brian Esposito, who team sources said has been reassigned from bench coach to special assistant. So overall, though, you're keeping that. You're buffing the staff. Fine, whatever. And just genuinely, I don't know too much. I already have talked about how I don't know too much about what it takes to be a good manager. It's hard to evaluate what I think makes for a good candidate. But on top of that, I just don't think that it's going to be any easier when it comes to bench coaches, right? Lord knows I'm not going to be able to help with that. But with Steven Souza Jr., I want to talk about him really quickly. First of all, yes, more connections to Stammen, more connections. And I understand that there's maybe some fans and listeners that recoil at the idea of just a more nepotismic. I don't even know if that's a version, a variant of that word. But that sort of style with the Padres, right? Like some people might be a little bit worried about how many people that they're hiring that just are familiar with the Padres at one point, right? So, okay, you get to be the manager. Now, that seems to be the main criticisms for the Craig Stammen hire, so I imagine that may occur here too. And as well, some people will say, wait, Steven Souza Jr., who has a lifetime slash line of 229, 318, 411, a 100 WRC plus, he only accumulated 5 wins above replacement in his career. He basically had one especially great year when he hit 30 home runs, by the way, in 2017. Shout out to Steven Souza. But what I have to say to that is that doesn't necessarily make for a good hitting coach. And this actually is really relevant to me because as someone who's part of Just Baseball, although I have been writing as much recently, I got to get back on that. Look forward to my Dylan Cease piece that I'm going to be writing for them soon, among many other things. But they actually have like a podcast network, and they have some other shows that are part of the network that aren't like just baseball shows, right? Like they hire things, contracts, blah, blah, blah. And one of them is the Marine Layer podcast. And I actually remember from a year ago, they had Steven Souza Jr. on the show. And it was a great listen that I highly recommend everyone go check out. Shout out to the Marine Layer guys. Doing great stuff over there. I highly recommend going and check that episode out because he talked really eloquently. I think in a lot of different areas of baseball. And I think that he made a great point where he's like, yeah, there are going to be some guys, I'm paraphrasing, that had Hall of Fame numbers and stuff, and they just approach this as, well, do what I do sometimes, right? Or do what I did. Right. And some guys are like, well, I can't hit 55 home runs, Barry Bonds. You know what I mean? I'm not that good of a player. So how do you teach guys other than just showing them data? Eric Hosmer talked about this on one of his podcasts about maybe a little bit under a year ago or something like that, where he basically said that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily defending Hosmer's tenure with the Padres, but he brought up that he would say sometimes they would have these, nerds sort of analytics guys, not the nerd part, I'm paraphrasing again, that would come in and be like, hey, look, the ground balls, this is why it's killing us, right? The ground ball gremlin that he was. And he made a very astute point where he was like, okay, cool. Like, how do I fix that? And then the guys would be like, well, here's a data point. He's like, yeah, but how do I like get myself to be able to adjust and be able to swing the bat that way? And sometimes they don't have answers. And I do think that that is an indictment on the Padres hitting staff, Padres management, Padres organization, that a player will come out and say something like that. Is it possible this is sour grapes? Of course, right? This could be sour grapes. And maybe there were some players that adjusted to Padres training staff and coaching staff, and especially in this case, hitting coaches. And then while Eric Hosmer did not, considering that he just was not as great of an MLB player as some others, right? So that is possible. But I do think that it is a fairly great point to make on Hosmer's part, right? So I think that having someone like Souza, who seems to be very keenly aware of this, and some of the analysis that I've read online seems to be that he really is going to prioritize being a lot more aggressive at the plate. Right. And I like that because what has been made clear over the past couple of years is the Padres really highly desire line drives, and more importantly, a lack of strikeouts, low strikeout players who get on base. Right. And that's all well and good, but it doesn't offer as much consistency as you would think when it comes to a 162 game schedule. Do I want individual players that are just going to be on base, get some hits and stuff like that? Of course. But when it comes to consistent success offensively, hitting home runs is the way to go usually, and you want to be aggressive, right? How many times have we seen over the years that the Padres have no problem with getting walks, and that used to be the problem that hurt them back in the day, right? Back in the Hunter Renfroe days, right? But then it has created a new issue where they're just so bad at hitting with runners in scoring position. And he's talked about that being like, it doesn't seem like they have as much of a game plan, right? There's not as much of a philosophy that they abide by. So that makes me excited, right? If he can bring out, right, the more aggressive version of Xander Bogaerts that you saw in like 2022, 2023, not 23, 2021, right? Those some of his best offensive years, and get him to swing at better pitches, get him to drive in more runs. Because what have we talked about in the show? Xander Bogaerts has been the least clutch player in baseball since 2023. Literally the worst player with runners in scoring position in Major League Baseball since 23. So these new hirings, I'm hoping that they can help a lot and really turn around some of this team, because I do still think there's a lot of talent on this team, and I could see a new change of philosophy, a new just approach really helping out with that, and maybe getting even someone like Tatis to get back into that power-hungry murderer that he used to be back in his more offensive MVP days. Today, he's still a very good player. He's an all-around great player, but can we get the offensive side of him back? Maybe someone like Steven Souza Jr. can help with that. But folks, let me take a second to talk to you about one of our sponsors, and it's a sponsor that we like very, very much, and that is Game Time, folks. With the NFL season back, you want stress-free moments when you're buying your tickets to go to the game, because there's nothing like being at the game, but it can be stressful, and Game Time takes that away. It gives the advantage back to fans. It's the fast, easy, backed by the Game Time guarantee way to go. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best prices. Plus all those fees that you get, sometimes surprise fees at checkout, They're included. Don't worry. The price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time before. I've seen tickets as low as $100. They've got a zone deals option. You pick a section in the stadium, they pick the seat, and you save big. It's great, guys. Trust me. Deals galore on Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go. Download Game Time today. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing despite it all. Remember to go subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Follow myself on the YouTube and send me some questions. We will be doing that on Monday. And trust me, we've got a full slate next week. Send me some prospect questions because Arb Layton is going to be on the show, co-founder of Just Baseball, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So let's get back into it, though, guys. Let's get into the mailbag. Because we have a lot of different mailbag questions I wanted to get to. But again, I cannot emphasize enough how the Steven Souza thing, I think it could be good. I really do. I just think that having a new type of hitting coach could do wonders for this team, potentially, for a bounce back with some of their offensive players next year. But let's talk about some of the mailbag questions we got. First of all, let's get, because it is Fun Friday. Not as much of the usual Fun Friday, but we are answering some of your questions. And let's get a little bit of the haters out of the vibe, right? Let me get that, right? At Jeff Felton -N9P says, what hole do the Dodgers have at third base? Muncy is the Dodgers' third baseman for the next 2 years. I've been saying this on a couple podcasts, or at least my guest has also been saying this. I, once again, got this completely wrong, and I have to apologize. And this is the second thing that I've messed up in the past couple weeks. So, again, I need to be better. I thought Max Muncy, had some club option that wasn't going to be accepted or something like that. And I was wrong. It was actually accepted a couple weeks ago or earlier this month, I believe. So he should be there. I still think it's possible that they sign Murakami. I think that's possible that maybe they move Max Muncy, maybe they move some different players around. Maybe they try someone at second base or whatever. I just think that. And admittedly, though, I think part of this calculus was just saying, well, who's the top, Japanese player? They seem to have a monopoly on that. But that's unfair, given the fact that there are Japanese players from Seiya Suzuki, right? And the guy in Chicago, Shoto Imanaga, that haven't gone to the Dodgers. But usually when it's the top one, I feel like that's why I expected that. So I have to apologize for that. But I do think that the Dodgers are getting Kyle Tucker. That one I don't apologize for. I think that they need outfield help. And he is the best free agent on the market. I think that they're shelling out whatever it takes. Maybe there's a world in which there's a team that is really desperate for Kyle Tucker, so they give him $450, and the Dodgers are like, nah, man, we're good. But I think Kyle Tucker is my actual prediction for who definitely will sign with the Padres, or I'm sorry, with the Dodgers. So yeah, we'll see how it all pans out. But yes, I was wrong about that. But addressing further Dodgers haters, at JB_Pug_ says, I can see why y'all don't have many viewers. Whoa, take a shot. My goodness. Y'all are ignorant and blind to objective reality when it comes to baseball. Selling point to me was when you complained about Tatis being thrown at. Padres are easily and observably the most Bush League team in Major League Baseball. There's a reason that arguably the most respected and respectful player in the league does not salute your team before every game, and you're the only team he doesn't salute. Says quite a lot about the Padres and the Bush League players, like Machado, aka one of, if not the dirtiest players since A-Rod. Look up his dirty highlights. Either way, glad to see y'all failing. Yes, I'm well aware of Manny Machado's dirty highlights from 8 years ago. Okay, it's been a while, and understandably, right? Understandably, people still bring it up, but it's been a while, right? It's been a while. I would say in regards to the low viewership, I'd be like, well, all right, dude, sorry that I don't have the Dodgers media market or the Yankees media market. That's just kind of what happens when you're a small market team, right? And the next thing would be, what else did you say here that was insane? Easily and observably the most Bush League team in baseball. Have you met the Atlanta Braves, right? I don't think that there's any team that is especially Bush League in this league right now. I think that you would probably have to go with the Astros. Sorry, Freudian slip. The Astros. And again, I don't know where this is coming from. I think this is a little bit media driven, but mostly just social media driven. This idea that the Padres have the biggest cluster of losers ever that are just jerks nonstop. But as I talked about on this show, I thought that the way they reacted after the playoff loss was disgraceful and really stupid. And you're helping solidify a reputation, granted, that wasn't always earned. And I like the idea that, okay, so because according to you, there's because Manny Machado was dirty, that means that you could throw at Tatis 4 times in one series. Okay, whatever. Let's again. What could I say? Right? What could I say? I guess that's what it is when it comes to argue with Dodgers fans. And when it comes to Ohtani, well, yeah, he was hit by a pitch. One of them was intentional, I think, from Robert Suarez. The other one, I don't think you could say with certainty if it was, but one of them absolutely was intentional. And by the way, that followed getting hit by. So what happens, right? What is the argument we're having here? That because the Padres have some that means that you could just throw at us and then it doesn't matter? Okay. Anyway, moving on though to some more haters, the Dodger trolls, talking about what? Of course, he's a Dodgers hater. Sully, who is one of my guests this week, go check that out, or was kind of a state of the Padres Union. He accused Ohtani of gambling without evidence. I dislike both of these dudes, but watch for laughs. Oh, by the way, greatest moments of the Padres 2025 season was the 48 hours in first place. Ha ha, good joke. I wish I hadn't heard it before. And someone said it's funny hearing that shunned dude. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly. It's funny hearing him constantly whining about the Dodgers spending over and over again, as if the Padres don't have nearly 1.4 billion in contracts on a handful of guys. Both teams spend, which is hilarious, by the way. Both teams spend money. The difference is the Dodgers spend it intelligently and the Padres spend it foolishly. I want to save some of my thoughts on my annual Dodgers, are they the problem with baseball sort of conversation that I'm going to have at some point this offseason. Because it gets good views every time because Dodgers fans are very sensitive on the internet. And then people like to outrage bait and all that sort of stuff. But I will say that it's important to remember that Tatis, fine contract. Machado, fine contract. Cronenworth, not necessarily the best player, but fine contract. Bogaerts is a bit of a miss. Musgrove got hurt, right? It's not like they are littered with all bad contracts, right? This isn't the Angels. And I think that it's important to remember that one thing with the Dodgers is that they can afford to swing and miss, like they did with Michael Conforto and Tanner Scott, and to an extent Trevor Bauer, right? Some of those type of players, right? Julio Urias a little bit, or no, Julio Urias I think was in club control, so that's a bad example. But they've had some misses too. Look at the Phillies, right? They signed Nick Castellanos to a big deal. He was a super miss. There are other teams that it doesn't stymie their progress nearly as much as when the smaller market teams miss on some contracts. So I would disagree with the notion that it's only poor spending that's been their problem, but it is also true that the Bogaerts contract hurts, and that if you take that out, maybe things are a little bit better. But again, that's just one deal. The other deals have been pretty okay, right? But all in all, I get it. Moving on though to another comment though from at Phoenix Ash. We'll respond to your first part in a second, but he said you should do a filler episode talking about all of us crazy commentators, give your regulars funny awards or something, and roast the consistent haters. That would be a lot of fun on this episode. I'm probably just going to keep it with just what I usually do, which is just occasionally respond to the Dodgers people. And I want to address also like I do get some comments that are like, why do you respond to these people? Again, I respond to it for content, and I haven't heard too many people that are Padres fans complaining about it. I think that I speak for some of the frustrations. But also, I did an episode last year in terms of the whole, like, why are you trying to, why do you keep antagonizing them? I did an episode last year, I believe after the Blake Snell signing, and I took a lot of notes and I stated why I think this is a problem with baseball. And I didn't really blame the Dodgers. I just said that the Dodgers benefit from all these other teams that are the problem with baseball. And I really tried to have a lot of nuance about like why it stinks that if you're a fan of other teams, that this is a sport that continually tells you this really fun time of exciting new stars, that you're irrelevant, we don't care about you. And it's not that the Dodgers are doing that, it's the small market teams, right? That are cheap. But then everybody just attacked me for like 2 weeks after that episode. So I was like, okay, I have to remember, I needed the reminder, it's the internet, and you can't reason with people on the internet. It's just not going to help, right? I can reason with Dodgers fans face to face, right? Absolutely. I've done it before. Shout out to, I forgot when I did this episode from a while back. I forgot when I did it. It was a while ago, but I did a show with some Dodger friend of mine. I'm blanking so bad right now, but that's why I just decided to take the route of just trolling and just being antagonistic towards these commentators, because these type of people can't be reasoned with, right? Because in fairness, I'm also kind of crazy too. I'm wrong a lot of times, and I do get a little bit fan biased myself. But yeah, that's why we get into that, guys. But let me tell you, we're not going to make this all about responding to Dodgers haters. I also got some questions about a player you might have heard of, Fernando Tatis Jr. I want to talk about that. But first, guys, let me take a second to talk to you about one of our sponsors. That is FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300. $300, that's a lot. That's a lot. Well, your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And just like that, everybody, we are here in the final waiting moments of the Black Friday episode, which again, I was going to use originally to talk about the trade deadline, but we're going to save that for next week, actually, especially with the news about the hitting coach. Just gave me something else to talk about on the show. But remember to subscribe to the pod wherever you get your podcast from. Follow the show on YouTube, and yeah, do your thing over there. Leave your comments, and I will respond to them on this show at one time or another. But folks, let's keep responding. At Phoenix Ash 927 brings up the first part of his comment, said, late to the show, but my best moment for 2025 was a personal one. Being at the Mets game in New York when Manny hit a grand slam. I'm officially part of Slam Diego. That's great. I love that, man. And you actually mentioned on this channel before that you were attending that game. I was close to attending one of those games in New York, too. I ended up not being able to, which is unfortunate. Worst moment, being swept by the Orioles in September, he says. That was a series we should have swept. And if we did, we likely host the wild card, win the wild card, and have a great postseason run. Getting a little ahead of yourself, but I do agree with you that sweep series gets under discussed. That was like really, really bad. And again, the Padres have had opportunities these past 2 years, especially this year because the Dodgers were so banged up with their rotation, and they just didn't come through, unfortunately. But he also said Laureano getting hurt was a worse moment because he was the glue that made the offense go. We saw how well we did without him in the playoffs. And free agency take. We need 1 to 2 position players, first DH and catchers, and 2 to 3 starters. That's it. Quite possibly the shortest needs list of recent memory. And we won 90 last season. Very, very excited for 2026. Me too, man. And I think that I really just think that they need minimum amount. I think that if you could get like a decent pitcher, I think if you go out and get Ryan O'Hearn again, I think that would be pretty great. And I think that you just hope for, it has to be mentioned that Xander Bogaerts is the least clutch player like out there. Like him being a great defensive player who's going to have some speed, be all over the place, draw some walks, have good at bats, be a different type of change of pace batter in the lineup. I still think could be a good player. And I've talked about before on this show that I've equated my hope for Xander Bogaerts to Joe Johnson, who's a former NBA player. And he was a star at one point, and he was a pretty solid, dang good player, but he wasn't worth what his contract was. And his contract was like the highest paid player in the league. It was like a really overshot contract. And I think that could happen with Bogaerts, where he's like a 4-win player, 3.8 win player, right? Like a decent sort of guy to have in this lineup that is not going to kill them, not going to help them necessarily, and carry them, I should say is the right word, but he's not going to kill them either. So that's my hope. Moving on, though. Let's see here. What you guys sent in a lot of interesting comments, man. But one that I thought was interesting at Freddie Royal B GS3GU says, please don't make Miller a starter. Let's get Scooball. Again, I have to emphasize, and again, this is YouTube comments. I get it, but Tariq Skubal, there is no planet in which the Padres could get him. This is a guy who's won 2 Cy Youngs. This is a guy who is under control, right? It's not like he's a rental for this just this year. At least I think he's under control for a couple more years. And with him in the trade rumors, I understand, right, that he is in trade rumors. That is something that could very well happen this offseason, but you're not getting it with just Ethan Salas. Like, that's their best prospect. The farm system needs to regenerate, and I have confidence that AJ Preller can do that. That'll be important, especially if he's all hell-bent on giving these long-term contracts and trading prospects for win-now players. But that's not. I just don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think Freddie Peralta is going to happen. They don't have enough. And if you're annoyed by that, then where were you when I was saying why I was a little bit worried about the Mason Miller trade and giving up Leo DeVries, right? And giving up all these prospects, or even last year when they gave up some of their top pitching prospects for Tanner Scott, right? And by the way, both of those trades, like, those players played well for the Padres and they had a chance to win the title. So I'm not going to fault AJ too much for that. But yeah. And in terms of Mason Miller, I understand the concern of making him a starter. He's so good, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, basically mentality. But again, it depends all on what they do in free agency. If they go silent, I don't see Luke Weaver and whoever the heck Bleacher Report being there in the rotation. I mean, they could be, but I think that they're going to test out Mason Miller. And the fact that after acquiring him at the trade deadline, AJ Preller basically didn't commit, right? He kind of smirked a little bit and was like, hey, we'll see how we use him, going into the future. I think he knows. And I think that if he is turned into a starting pitcher, the trade makes a lot more sense. Or maybe not makes a lot more sense, but the trade becomes more interesting or more understandable to a degree of why you'd give up a big prospect like that for a reliever. Granted, possibly the best one in the sport and one that you have years of control for. I'm just saying that we'll have to see how it shakes out. And I do think that it depends. I think Preller very wisely said, this guy's going to help us for a playoff run this year. And we have the option. We're kind of planning for the future. If I can't get someone in free agency, because it's never a guarantee, then we could try working on him in spring training, turn him into a starter. And the last time the Padres did that was with Seth Lugo. Turned out pretty dang good. And we've seen a lot of pitchers. We've seen this be a little bit of a trend. Clay Holmes was a pretty good starter, right? So maybe that could happen with Mason Miller, who at one point was expected to be a starter in Major League Baseball. So I wouldn't be too terrified of it. But again, depends on what happens in free agency. Depends on how Joe Musgrove's rehab goes, all that sort of stuff, right? So it's going to be very, very interesting to say the least. We got another comment, though. This one coming from at Generalissimo Zod, which, again, one of my favorite usernames. You've been on the channel before. He said, is it bold now to predict Tatis wins the MVP? Given the past few years of regression, do none super duper stars win the MVP? I think he will bounce back. That's my bold prediction. First of all, my guy Jake Garriotti on yesterday's episode for Things We're Thankful For, he said thankful for something in the future, which is Tatis winning MVP. So apparently not. You know what I mean? A lot of people are saying the same thing. I don't think it's that bold, only because I think it would be bold maybe if you want to say that he hits for like 45 home runs again, that he could get to that level of power, maybe. But at the same time, I must emphasize he was still top 10 in wins above replacement. He was one of the 10 best position players in Major League Baseball this year. Because of the speed, because of the walk rate, he still had a 130 WRC plus, still hit for 25, 26 home runs. He still was able to do that, stole a lot of bags. And then last but not least was one of the best outfield defenders in baseball, right? So on his surface value, it's not that bold, but I understand that if you've seen his offense, only offense, what he has been at the plate, that it might be a little bit bold to still predict him to do that. So yeah, I'd say to an extent, but my thing is, like, we see it though. We see the data. We see that he still hits the ball really hard. We still see that his average exit velocity is great. Can he just get back to whatever he was doing, messing around with his plate approach? Yeah, he walked a lot more this year. But maybe a rise being at the lineup, maybe that made pitchers throw him less fastballs, less hittable pitches to be able to hit home runs for. I think that next year, it's still very, very possible that Tatis goes out and balls out. But at the very minimum, he's a very excellent player, all-around player. We love him very much. Next comment that I got was from at the Kershaw Curse. Ethan Salas went from generational talent to catching Roki Sasaki during recruitment to fringe all-star to will be out of top 100 prospects in the matter of 2 years. Ethan Salas will never make the all-star as a strictly defensive catcher with no bat. He will have a better chance at DFA than all-star, says at the _ Kershaw Curse. So, as you guys know, I love talking about the Dodgers commentators, who are, of course, not biased whatsoever. I'm going to talk about this more with Aram next week for prospect talk, but my thinking around Ethan Salas, and I talked about this with him last year, I think that his ranking isn't less of him being a bust, but I think it's people got way, way, way too aggressive with him. They judged, he was ranked as like a top level prospect when he was 17, guys. Some people had him in like top 5, and Aram, by the way, did not. He had him in like the 60s or 50s, where he was like, I love this guy. He's a very exciting prospect, and they might have cooked with him. But overall, this is still a guy that has a lot to work on with his bat. But I think that the reason he's fallen out has really been that he was ranked way too high to begin with, and that this is going to take time. He's still only 19. It's like there's a reason why he's on prospect lists to begin with. He's still 19. I'm not giving up. And you know why I'm not giving up? Because people also did this with Mackenzie Gore. And Mackenzie Gore was outside of some people's top 100s, understandably, because he was faltering in the minors. And it was just weird, some of the areas that he was faltering in. And guess what? Ends up coming to Major League Baseball, and he's a pretty good pitcher. He gets a lot of Ks. He struggled this second half, but he's a pretty good baseball pitcher, right? So if he's that tier, Ethan Salas of a prospect, that's why he gets Gabriel Barrino comparisons, because at the very minimum, his defense is great. And I hate to break it to you, Kershaw Curse, defense batters for catchers, right? Like that is a big, big, big factor. And if that's all he is to start, and slowly builds into the bat, that has a lot of value. And again, like I've said many times, the Padres have been missing on catcher for so long. It's a lottery ticket, sure, but I would not be surprised if over time, what if he becomes like a 240 hitter? Combined with the defense, that is an all-star player. Gabriel Moreno is the comp that I've heard. That is an all-star caliber player, or at least close to it, fringe all-star type of stuff. So I'm not giving up on Salas, and I'm not doing this whole, I'm a Dodgers fan, and I think all of your prospects actually suck. What are we doing, right? What are we doing? That doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, that is basically it, guys, for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Tell everybody else to go check it out. Hopefully everybody had a nice holiday week. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Hopefully it was nice and fruitful and lovely. I, at this time, am hanging out with my friends for Black Friday, watching Eagles Bears. So send me comments of your prediction for who wins that game, and I'll read on Monday if you were right or not. Not really. I mean, it's a baseball podcast, but send any questions or comments you want to have. We're going to do a big mailbag next week, and we're going to have a lot of different guests on next week too. Not just one. I'm not going to spoil everything that's going down next week, but it's going to be a lot of fun. With that all being said, guys, that about does it for today's edition of Locked On Padres podcast. Until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful, my Friday faithful homies. Take care.